I never thought camping at my own ranch would lead to flashing red and blue lights in the middle of the night, but that's exactly what happened. One second, I was roasting marshmallows beside my quiet lake, enjoying the peace I worked so hard to earn, and the next, I was surrounded by HOA board members shouting about rules, and cops walking toward me like I'd broken into my own land. Yeah, you heard that right. The HOA called the police on me while I was camping on my private ranch. Now, before you think this was some misunderstanding, trust me, it wasn't. I've owned that land for years. It's fully fenced, clearly marked, and miles from the nearest neighborhood. So imagine my shock when I was told I was violating HOA guidelines. Guidelines? For what? A lake that's not even in their community jurisdiction. That's when I knew something didn't add up. Why would the HOA care so much about what I was doing on my own property? Lest there was something they didn't want me to know. That night, after the cops left and things calmed down, I started digging into records, maps, and even some trail cam footage I had forgotten was still running. What I found left me stunned and furious. Turns out, the HOA board had been sneaking onto my land for months, maybe even longer. Fishing, walking their dogs, even throwing little get-togethers by the lake like it was some public park. No permission, no lease, nothing. And the wild part, they never thought I'd catch on because they assumed I didn't live nearby. They thought the land was just sitting there, so why call the cops now? What were they trying to hide or protect? Stick around, because in the next part, I'll walk you through exactly what I found on those trail cams, and why the HOA might be facing more than just a neighborly disagreement. The next morning, I drove straight to the edge of the lake where I'd set up camp. I kept thinking about how quickly everything had spiraled, how the HOA acted like they had some kind of authority out here, like I was the trespasser. It didn't sit right with me. So I started looking around. That's when I noticed a small trail worn into the grass behind a tree line, not one I had made. It was subtle, but clear. A path used regularly. I followed it for a few minutes, and sure enough, led right to a back gate. Unlocked, it faced the edge of a nearby housing community. One that just happened to be managed by the same HOA that showed up last night. I stood there for a moment, just taking it in. That gate had never been part of my fencing plan. Someone had added it. Quietly, I went back to check the trail cam I had strapped to an old oak tree months ago. Honestly, I'd forgotten it was there. The batteries were weak, but it still had some footage. I took it home and started scrubbing through the clips. That's when things got weirder. Over the past few months, I saw people coming in groups. Some were walking dogs, others were fishing, even kids swimming at the edge of the lake. None of them were familiar faces. One clip showed a guy in a fold-up chair drinking a beer, legs in the water like he owned the place. They weren't just wandering in by mistake. This was routine. I started to recognize a few of them from the night before. The same HOA members who claimed I was the one breaking rules. That's when a whole new question hit me. Were they using this land as their private escape this whole time, banking on the fact I wasn't around enough to notice? Something about their urgency last night suddenly made more sense. But it also raised a bigger concern I couldn't shake. Just how far were they willing to go to keep this quiet? I never imagined coming home from work on a quiet Saturday afternoon would turn into one of the most bizarre neighborhood moments of my life. The sun was still high, the sky clear, and as I pulled into my driveway, something felt ... off. Music was playing. Laughter echoed from somewhere it shouldn't. And the scent of grilled shrimp and rose was definitely not coming from my house. That's when I saw balloons tied to my fence, folding chairs and tables set up across my front lawn, and a crowd of overdressed strangers clinking glasses like they were in a Hallmark movie. Right in the middle of it all, there she was, Kieran. If you live in a neighborhood with an HOA, or just have one of those neighbors who thinks every square inch of the block is hers to command, you already know a Karen. Ours is textbook. Always complaining about trash bins being left out too long, measuring grass height like she's got a ruler in her pocket, and somehow knowing everyone's business before they do. But this? Hosting an actual garden party on someone else's property without permission. That crossed a line even for her. I tried to be civil. At first, I walked up to her and asked what in the world was going on. Her response: "Oh, don't worry, it's just for a couple of hours. You weren't using the space anyway." As if my front yard was some kind of community park she had just rented out. The audacity was unreal. I could feel my blood boiling. But instead of yelling, I smiled, turned around, and walked straight to the side of my house right where the sprinkler controls were. If she wanted a garden party on my lawn, she was about to get the full garden experience. But just as I reached for the dial, something unexpected happened. Something that made me pause for a second. Just as I was about to twist that dial and let the sprinklers roar to life, I noticed someone standing near the flower bed by my porch. He wasn't dressed like the other guests, no fancy hat, no wine glass. Just a clipboard in hand and a camera slung around his neck. At first, I thought maybe Karen had hired an event photographer, but the way he was eyeing the edges of the lawn, taking photos of the fence line, and jotting notes didn't seem very festive. That's when it hit me. He wasn't a guest. He looked like someone from the HOA, or worse, a property appraiser. I ducked back behind the hedge and held off on turning the sprinklers on. If this guy was documenting things, I didn't want to give Karen any ammo to twist the story around later. Because trust me, she's good at flipping situations. The kind of person who'll crash your lawn, ruin your weekend, and somehow convince the HOA that you're the problem. I'd seen her pull that move more than once, especially after the Halloween incident last year with the fog machine. Meanwhile, her guests were still chatting it up like nothing was wrong, heels digging into my grass, wine spilling on my stepping stones. Someone even parked halfway up my driveway. I couldn't believe how bold it all was. I spotted a few neighbors across the street watching from behind their curtains. They knew what was happening. Everyone knew Karen had a way of pushing limits, but no one ever stood up to her. That's what really burned me. The clipboard guy walked off toward the sidewalk, and I figured I had a window. But then I heard Karen raise her glass. She stood on my porch like she owned the place, giving a toast loud enough for the whole block to hear. I couldn't believe what she said next. Karen's voice cut through the hum of conversation as she raised her glass, smiling with that smug confidence that always made my skin crawl. "Two new neighbors who bring life to the neighborhood," she said, her eyes flicking right at me. The crowd cheered, and a few even clapped, though I could tell some of them were just trying to be polite. It felt like she was daring me to say something, to challenge her right there and then. I glanced around and noticed how relaxed she looked, like she'd planned this whole thing for weeks. Maybe she wanted to send a message to stake her claim on my property or assert control over the block. I couldn't help but think back to the countless little battles we'd had over lawn decorations, parking spots, and those ridiculous noise complaints she kept filing. Every time, it was like she was trying to control not just her own yard, but everyone else's lives too. Then there was the subplot no one really talked about: Karen's obsession with appearances. The garden party wasn't just about celebrating. Neighbors, it was about showing off. The way her guests mingled, the perfectly arranged flower pots, and the fancy hors d'oeuvres all screamed, "Look at me." I wondered if she ever felt lonely underneath all that performance, or if this was her way of masking something else, something more insecure. I caught the eye of a few neighbors peeking from behind their curtains. Some gave me subtle nods, maybe hoping I'd stand up for the rest of us. Others looked worried, probably afraid to get involved. The HOA meetings always had Karen's influence, and I suspected this party was just another power move. As I stood there, the sprinkler dial in hand, I wrestled with the choice ahead. Do I disrupt her carefully crafted moment and risk escalating the tension? Or do I wait and see how far she's willing to push before I act? The stakes felt higher than ever, and the neighborhood's peace was hanging by a thread. The moment stretched longer than I expected. Karen's guests were now fully settled, laughter growing louder and glasses clinking more frequently, as if nothing out of the ordinary was happening on my lawn. I felt the weight of every eye that lingered on me as I moved slowly toward the sprinkler control. My heart was pounding, adrenaline mixing with frustration and a bit of disbelief. Was I really about to soak an entire party because Karen decided to throw a garden bash without asking? Just as my fingers brushed the dial, I caught sight of the clipboard guy again. This time, he was talking quietly to Karen, nodding toward my house, then scanning the lawn with that calculating look. It felt like they were plotting something, like this garden party was part of a bigger plan I hadn't yet pieced together. My mind raced through every weird interaction we'd had lately, every weird complaint she'd made to the HOA about me. Could this be another attempt to build a case against me? I hesitated, trying to steady my breathing, when suddenly one of Karen's guests stepped too close to my prized rose bush. I winced as she trampled a few petals, oblivious to the damage. Karen noticed but just waved it off with a smirk, clearly not caring about my property at all. That's when I felt the real sting, not just because my lawn was being invaded, but because no one seemed ready to stand up for me. It was like Karen had everyone wrapped around her finger. Just as I was about to make a decision, the music shifted to a louder, more energetic song. Karen raised her voice, rallying the crowd for a toast or maybe a speech. Her eyes locked on mine again, sharper this time, daring me to ruin the moment. Tension cracked the air like static. Every second felt like a countdown to something big. The sprinklers beckoned, and the whole block was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Just when I thought the tension couldn't get any thicker, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting maybe a message from a concerned neighbor or even a warning from the HOA instead. It was a notification from the city on alert about a complaint filed against me. The subject, unauthorized water usage. My heart sank. Had Karen already called them, trying to turn my own sprinkler against me before I even had the chance to act? I looked back toward the party, and that's when I saw it, two cars pulling up slowly at the end of the street. Not guests, but actual city inspectors, clipboard and all, stepping out with a serious look. The crowd's chatter dropped to murmurs. Karen's smile didn't falter. If anything, it got wider, like she was ready to take her victory lap. It hit me this garden party wasn't just about showing off or stepping on my toes. It was a carefully planned trap designed to catch me in the act of breaking some rule. All along, Karen had been playing a longer game, and now the whole neighborhood was watching to see what I'd do next. My front yard, my home, was suddenly a stage for a showdown I hadn't signed up for. The sprinkler dial felt heavier in my hand, and the decision that once seemed simple now felt like walking a tightrope. Do I turn them on and risk a city fine, or worse? Or do I hold back and let Karen's party go on, knowing she's already won this round? The tension was suffocating. Every glance from the neighbors felt like a silent judgment. Every cheer from Karen's group a reminder of how isolated I'd become. This wasn't just about sprinklers or a garden party anymore. It was about standing my ground, fighting back against a neighbor who wouldn't stop pushing no matter the cost. As the inspectors approached my gate, ready to begin their check, I knew the moment of truth was right in front of me.